small t truth and big T truth. I'm just saying that if you want to show that truth, with your manipulation, then I've got no problem with the manipulation. But even that manipulation, like Lori said, should be ethical.
It was also, I mean, it does go further, you're right. I mean, the 64,000.
Oh, well, you wanted the policy committee.
Sorry, Ryan.
Upstage.
The $64,000 question and payola led to an investigation of Wild Kingdom, right? And Wild Kingdom was forced to put a disclaimer on after every one of their programs that some of the scenes were dramatized, right? And that started, I don't know if that's continuing or not. Wild Kingdom now has Jim Fowler has taken over Wild Kingdom, and I don't watch it anymore.
It's in
Does
rerun,
anyone know
too.
whether they still have that disclaimer?
I don't know. I haven't seen it
Have
in
they
years.
stopped doing that?
Last one I saw that.
It did.
Did it?
So I think that's an important aspect. I mean, perhaps some manipulation can be ethically done. I'm not real clear about that, but probably in some ways. But I think it has to be admitted to.
Oh, you have to be more specific, though. Take a textbook. You don't say some of this textbook isn't true. If you've got something in there, you better be damn accurate about it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying. Yeah, I agree with that, 100%. What I'm saying is that if the scenes are dramatized, if they're accurate, that's probably okay, but you still owe it to the viewer to say that they were dramatized.
Yeah, it's still not clear in my mind what is ethical and what is not. What could be manipulated and what couldn't. I guess it depends on the situation and how far I as a filmmaker would go. So, and what I expect my viewers to get out of it. So I don't know.
Well, from the scientist standpoint, I don't care if it's big T or little t, so long as it's one or the other. And how you get there, that's where the art comes in, and the filmmaking skill comes in. How you get there, I don't care about. I just want it to be true. And how you simulate it, that's up to you.
Somebody had a question?
Just going to say that the question about ethics, I mean, it's not like it's right or it's wrong. There's a pretty wide gray area. And
Yeah.
what you would do, somebody else might. But I think, if there is some manipulation, I agree. I as a viewer would feel a lot more less manipulated as a viewer if I knew that disclaimer was there. And the whole question of ethics certainly isn't just here. I mean, within the whole environmental movement and community, the question of do you accept corporate money for your organization to do this or that. I mean,
That's a whole nother
whole
ball game. Yeah.
going on. So it's I mean it's always going to be there.
So is it? Oh, excuse me. Is it as in?
I'd like to hear how you all are approaching the series that you're doing, and sort of.
It's really easy for us because we know what's right and what's wrong. No, it's easy for us because we're not really dealing with an animal. This is something that will probably come up in the next session, but in terms of the wildlife formula. The wildlife formula basically is, okay, let's get a kind of we're coming down, here's the animal and it's where it lives. Here's the animal interacting with other animals. Here's a birth. Here's a little more what's around. Here's predation. And in the last 5 minutes, this animal is endangered. It plays an important role. We don't know what benefit it can play for man yet, but it is important to save it. That's kind of the wildlife nature, film formula.
With handpipes.
And they're successful. It works. And they're fun, but what we're doing is something entirely different. It's called Animals of the Mind, and what we're addressing is the way that people mold animals to suit their purposes. And the first animal that we've chosen is the wolf because it's just a prime example of how we've done this. And we've looked at how Native Americans or hunter-gatherers viewed the wolf, which is a rather respectful view that behooved them to imitate this animal because its endurance, its social structure, everything about it is quite similar to the way they live. With the advent of agriculture, the wolves PR takes a big turn for the worse. We become a very control-oriented species, and the wolf is wild, and that's the antithesis of what we're all about. So then you have stories like Little Red Riding Hood, which is actually a sexual warning tale, telling little girls to stay on the straight and narrow. She screws up. She steps off the path, even though it's an altruistic move that she's doing. Pick a flower for grandma, and that's where she runs into trouble. She meets the wolf. He dashes ahead, kills grandma. She gets there, and I don't know if you ever heard the original story, but I mean, it's pretty amazing. I mean, she gets into bed with the wolf, and it's all quite suggestive there, and drinks the blood of her grandmother. She says she has to go to the bathroom, and the wolf says, "I'll just do it here. That's okay." Again, a lack of control, a wildness there. Anyway, the story ends with the wolf eating her. That's the end. I mean, there's no happy hunter that cuts her out of the stomach or anything. So she screwed up. She just made one little mistake. She didn't control herself, and that's what wolves are about to agricultural people.
And that's just a small segment in our film,
Yeah.
too.
So, in other words, we're not having to manipulate animals. We did film some captive wolves. And then we bought some stock footage. But a lot of what we're doing is showing this animal is depicted through art and music and history. And it's another way of dealing with wildlife. It's a rather new way to deal with wildlife.
Actually, when you said buying stock footage, that raised an interesting question. I mean, what do you know about the stock footage?
How did they get it? Yeah, that has been brought up before, and in the stock footage that we bought, we know the person personally, and I know for a fact that he did not stage any of this. But yeah, that's a problem. How deeply do you want to get involved with checking out where your stock footage came from? So even if you have a perfectly what you feel in your mind is an ethical piece of film, and then you bought some footage that the guy went out and trapped it and tamed it and fed it, drugged or whatever, I mean, if somebody finds out, your film is down the toilet. But it depends on how deep you want to dig into that. It's better to shoot your own stuff and know in your own mind what you've done, what is good and what is bad.
Why don't we take, I mean, like we're at the end of this session, why don't we take a break
Yeah,
here?
we probably should.
And then those of you who want to return, we can keep discussing things. And we do have some examples that we're going to show you. We're going to talk about music. I mean, one of the things, I guess, in the Seagull thing that got me the most is the violins. And the same with, Hollywood movies. It's like if the piece isn't strong enough to tell you you should be sad, then it's not very strong. And it's really sad when they gotta bring in a violin
I
score to
cried.
tell you you're about ready to cry.
I did. When I saw it.
So anyway, we'll show some uses of music and talk about sound, putting sound in.
So we want to go more in the next session of how to actually do it.
And also get your tips from you guys too. So why don't you go ahead and take a break, get to the bathroom, get a drink of water.
It's kind of quite obvious when you say it's rainforest. But it's a little bit different than what we're used to seeing. And someone asked how this was distributed, and I had no idea. I've only seen it here since we have a copy of it. But I don't know how to distribute this, and it would be nice to see something like this on there. Are they?
I think so. I mean, mine have been taken.
Yeah. That's a problem with a lot of these really good ones, is that nobody knows about them, or the TV stations won't pick them up. When Bruce and I first started on our wolf film, we had a hell of a time trying to figure out where it was going to go after it came out of our cutting room. And we're still having that problem. Maybe that's something we could talk about a little bit later on. Once you actually get a program on, what do you do with it? Where are you going to air it? Who's going to accept it? We've had a problem because our format is different than what like Discovery or Nature wants, so that's a real problem. But that's a whole nother story. But, okay, Bruce wants to.
Yeah, well, I thought I wanted to change directions. I mean, originally we were kind of going to go into this little nuts and bolts thing on some techniques and stuff, but I think a lot of the stuff you guys are probably aware of, and what might be more fun is to discuss let's call this, what can we do that's new in the nature film, not just wildlife, but nature films. I mean, here's like a plea to be aware of what's going on in the rainforest, okay, and that's kind of a different way of doing it than, say, what National Geographic or Audubon might give us, an hour-long special with all the animals. So I thought it might anyway be fun to come up with some ideas of what you guys think are avenues that are new to address environmental concerns or nature programming. And then along the way, we can still show you some examples of things that we felt worked or didn't work. One of the things that we're trying to get away from in the Animals of the Mind series is cliches on animals, of always presenting. Well, let's just show that shark thing. I want to show that so
It's
bad.
in there. It's
right
a
here?
half inch. It's in the half inch. Mhm.
Hey, just watch this.
We won't give you anything bad. We want you to be totally unbiased. Watching this.
Oceanic adventures. And no member of the shark realm can match the fearless attack and power of the great white. If there is inevitability of death in nature, it can be seen in the expressionless black eye of this supreme predator. Hunters of marine mammals, white sharks patrol the shallows, creating chaos, driving their prey to fatal error. Swift and powerful, sea lions reign supreme. But for an occasional unwelcome visitor. The world of predators is a battlefield. A battlefield where emotions are mute and instincts automatic. White sharks have evolved little in the last 500,000 years. There has been no need for change. And so the predator-prey struggle runs its course, as it has for millennia, each animal responding to the primal instincts of survival. Panic clouds judgment. The colony explodes. The white shark is a more capable hunter than we ever imagined. Its eyes keen, its brain complex. What appears to be necessary neutrality of nature.
Brings to mind images of that piranha scene.
All the way down to this end.
Yeah. Well,
Hey,
that's
I feel
what it's
cheated.
talking
I didn't
about
see any
too,
blood. I was
the
hoping for
music.
some blood.
Yeah, I thought of the piranha dipping the caracara in the piranha
Before
water.
I say anything about this, I'd like to get your reaction.
My reaction is, I'd like to see it again without the sound, without the music, without the narration, without the slow motion, with the facts, which in the facts is basically going back and forth the same thing. So it's just, it's not really that strong visually, realistically. What's strong is what's being touched up to dramatize it.
So you're saying that the visuals are being supported by what's being said in the music, more or
Yeah,
less.
to me, it's
So
not
without
even
those two,
compatible. It's not even complementary.
right, right.
It's great filmmaking.
Cinematography is excellent,
Well, I
yeah.
mean, but
Well,
it's the manipulation of images, the juxtaposition of things. It's great filmmaking in terms of being able to affect your audience.
Well, he used a technique there that he's shooting those seals in one location and then the shark in the other, and then putting those together to create a situation that would happen in nature, even though it's quite obvious to us, because we're knowledgeable about this, that that could not have happened in the same place and time. So that's a technique that he used along with the music and the narrative to support all that. I find it too over dramatic, and it just, it's nauseating.
Yeah, or to humor.
Yeah.
There's the deep black eyes of death. Or
Don't you just hate sharks now?
It's an animal. I mean, it's not a deep black eye.
They make you
Right.
fear it, and you don't even know it. They don't explain what it is. They just make you fear
Right.
it automatically.
But the way he cut that, though, and that's an editing thing, but the way he cut that with the shark and then the prey, the shark prey, and the teeth. If you weren't listening to the narrative or the music, would you still
No, I
hate
think-
sharks because of the way it was edited?
No, I would think it's in two different parts of the water entirely.
It would be
That's
more
what
obvious then,
makes
huh? Yeah.
I think partly it's targeting, though, too. He was not targeting people in eastern Montana with that film. He was targeting these people in Hollywood and Los Angeles and San Francisco that, hell, they aren't going to watch it, but it's not all hammed up like that, you know? And so he's talking to a different audience than Bruce will ever talk to. And so I think there's even a little virtue in all the hamming it up and all that, because he was targeting people that we don't even know, you know.
What I'd put forth on this, though, is that you, first of all, on the writing level, I mean, why tell somebody what you can show them? I mean, some of the things that get said further on in this, this is Ocean Symphony, and there's some incredible footage in there. But there's a seal under the ice, and Leonard Nimoy tells us there's a seal under the ice. It's like, oh, I thought I was watching television. I mean, if you're gonna write things, you're gonna say something, have it beef up what can't be seen, like this shark weighs X amount of pounds, or this shark is 10 feet long. But so much of what he says, he's just stating the obvious.
What was the use of this? Was it a film or a?
Yeah, what happens is you saw one little vignette, and then there's a vignette about orcas, and then there's a vignette about seals. I mean, it's a bunch of little pieces.
All as informative as this.
Oh,
All
yeah,
this-
and more.
Do any of them have a payoff? I mean,
I don't think that there is.
It
but-
doesn't develop a story.
read it already. Come on.
Yeah. Each one starts off, you saw the wording, the character generation up there, which Leonard reads to you, and then you take off on this thing, and then they all end with, you saw the scene, you're looking up through the water, and they all have pretty heavy-duty music.
Very heavy-duty music.
I'd still argue, though, that he's talking to a real balmy audience that's never, they're in Disneyland. Hell, how are you going to talk to people in Disneyland? Something like that, I suppose. I don't know.
So you're saying
no?
what he's saying is biologically accurate though in his what
No,
he's
I'm
saying, so
saying
that
I'm saying that it does have some virtue into it. That he's talking to an audience that we can't even comprehend them.
that's
And
true.
somebody's got to talk to them also. And I think he was trying. I don't know if it's a particularly good job, but he was trying to talk to kind of people that aren't going to watch George Page. They aren't going to watch David Suzuki. It's got to be glittering and glowing, and got to be glitz all over the place, or hell, they're out of the room.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. What I'm saying too is that, I mean, in the writing, for instance, why not just go the step farther? If you're going to have it be Spartan, have it be Spartan with something that's not obvious. You maybe actually tell them something, and then what I happen to react to in terms of that music is it's telling me this is a bad animal.
And that's not what you want to portray.
Well, I'm telling you that the sea lions are the good animals, because their music changes dramatically, and they look all,
Right.
healthy. I mean, it really does
Yeah.
play up like Darth Vader and.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed to just something that happens in nature.
Right.
But nature's neutral.
Right.
The necessary neutrality of nature. I like that.
This guy's taking advantage of the fact that you can't read the words.
Well, I think you're getting our point here. That's why we want to show you some of these clips. That, like I said at the beginning, this is the best way to figure out how to make wildlife films is by seeing something that doesn't appeal to most of the audience. So that's what I want to bring up. Somebody had a question
Well, I
right
was
there.
gonna say, you were talking about the writing. The writing, played into that too. Shark has changed little in 20 pounds. I mean, it's sort of like the savage. I doubt that the sea lions have evolved a whole hell of a
That's
lot.
true. They didn't say much about the, yeah.
Actually, the shark is pretty amazing in that its evolutionary change has been real minimal. It's pretty much found a shape and niche that it's maintained for a long time.
Factual or not, I'm certainly not
Yeah.
contesting it's factual. It was portrayed factually in a very manipulative way as a very savagery.
Yeah.
I'm playing devil's advocate to a degree, but the Hollywood moguls might watch that are not neutral. They're very, very powerful people. They wouldn't come to hear me in 1,000 years, but they'll watch that sort of thing, and I think Nimoy is trying to talk to them. You don't talk to them like you talk to other people, and I think he knows how to talk to those people, and maybe he's doing it right. I don't know. But that's why I think it's categories. It's so important to know your categories and for people to, whether it's a producer or a writer or whatever, to know who their target is. Here's what we're going to do, here's who they are, and here's why we're going to do it this way. And we judge films on that basis. If they say this is a kid's film, boy, we make them toe the damn line on that. And if they didn't target kids, they're out the window.
So what was the target? Was this a film festival entry, and what was the target?
Well,
I don't remember the
I think they said probably general public, and I think it was the wrong category. We don't have a category for that film, really.
And in fact, those sharks eat that type of sea lion. I mean, they weren't telling us anything that wasn't, other than the fact that the shark was out in deep water and never
It
got
looked
in.
like almost a studio or
Tank.
or what am I, like a SeaWorld type shot to me, or just the color of the water.
Mechanical shark.
For Al, it very well
Bruce.
could have been, for Al getting to this, I kind of doubt it, but it was it had to be a captive shark. For this type of shot.
Now that's a real great white. And when you see the mechanical one, one of the things you'd notice if you ever watch Jaws, I watched it just recently. I liked the story. It did a horrible thing to sharks, but it looks pretty fakey. if you, and that's why they don't do too long of a shot on the shark. They're off it real quick.
This one showed a chum mark on its nose,
Yeah.
too,
Oh, did
like
it?
it hit a chum bag.
Oh.
And then it also too, and it bears its,
Yeah.
its gums pull up and those teeth are out. Ooh,
It's dramatic.
a killing machine.
Right.
The narrative is all there to capture somebody though, to get somebody's attention. If you're flipping through the station.
Yeah.
And you see a shark swimming along, you're gonna keep flipping, and you're, oh.
That it
You
does,
see the
yeah.
shark, you go,
Yeah.
whoa, what's this?
Well, and it works too, because I was just at that a film festival that went on in Jackson. They had a wildlife film festival there, and the Discovery Channel people were saying that for the last 3 years, and they're going into their fourth, they have a Shark Week, and they just in some time slot they just show shark stuff. I guess I don't know how this works, but they said they're not giving it up because people just tune in. They love sharks are a hot topic. Plus, sharks are about to become kind of like charismatic or cuddly now. I mean, Audubon just ran a piece on great whites being endangered, and Life magazine just had ran a cover story.
Yeah, it's
So
amazing
sharks
how
are
you
in
could take
vogue.
a deadly killer to a cuddly pet home.
Well, go ahead,
We
Laurie.
want to show another clip here from a different film, see what you think about this one. So listen to the music, the narrative, the visuals. Oops. I had it queued up and I just erased it, just rewound it. That was at the end. Hold on a minute. I don't know why it was at the end.
While
Yeah.
that's going on, think for a minute. New things that can be done with this medium of the nature film. If any of you guys got any ideas? Okay, let me get you started. I'll tell you one that I saw just last week. Instead of just nature film, this is trying to get kind of a warm feeling for like saving the environment. This guy did a 10-minute piece. It starts up out of the black, a little girl talking to her grandpa, and what it all gets down to is storytelling. I mean, the story is being told here again, and I alluded to this in the last session, the importance of storytelling. And anyway, what he ends up telling her, grandpa and granddaughter talking to her, he says, I knew you, and he talks about grandmother. I met your grandmother, she was in this tree. I'd taken a different path through the woods. I met her, she was sitting in this tree. And the little girl said, well, where is that? Is that tree still there? No. The forester? No. Where is it? It's gone. Meanwhile, in the background, this guy is edited in just pictures of animals, things like this, really high quality footage. And then as she's asking where has this gone, then he's showing scenes from like Poland and Czechoslovakia, which are just environmental nightmares over there. And then they go into that poem, for lack of a nail, the shoe is lost, for lack of a shoe, the horse is lost. Finally, and they talk a little more, it finally gets to the end, and they remember the poem in its entirety, and then the little girl is going, Grandpa? Grandpa? It's like he's died. So in 10 minutes, you've got this little lesson that's going to sort of talk about life and death. You had him sort of say things that have been lost, but then she's sort of there as the brightening hope of understanding of what's going on. And it's all done in this story context. And there's never any preaching at all that you should say this or you shouldn't say that. And then the use of this tree being gone that Grandma was in, thought was brilliant because it's something that anybody can relate to. Of having met somebody they loved in this one tree, and now it's been chopped down, and that's a part of their own history that just doesn't exist that's what I'm talking about when I talk about, you know, new ways of getting out, say, a message that has maybe a green content to it. Do you guys have some ideas?
Even with that example, I might identify with the purpose, I might identify with their goal, but that's still very manipulative. That's still very tear-jerking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to me, that's not far removed from the seagull speaking, because you're using grandmothers, you're using little girls, you're using stories about how we got together, so you're pulling on a lot of strings that don't necessarily have to do with me. But again, it's good if you want to get people involved with the forest and where the forest has gone. But you just have to be honest in realizing that that's also very manipulative.
Another with
And
African
as a
origins
result, there's a dishonesty in it.
Yeah, I guess I'd argue with you that it's not dishonest.
Emotional truth to it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that kind of identity in it.
It's manipulative, but
Well, we have an advocacy category, you know, if you're gonna be an advocate, nothing wrong with being an advocate, but, you know, it should be clearly recognized, hey, I'm gonna try to convince you this is the way, you know, you ought to be thinking, and, perfectly legitimate form, but rather than have that up against a, you know, a seventh grade, educational film, you know, better to have its own category. We're up to 21 different categories, and I have a feeling we've only started. There's just, you know, it's going like that.
Paula.
I just have a question. Something like that, is there a category that would fit that? I mean,
Well,
that's
Chuck
the
hasn't
problem
seen it.
with
I just saw this
everything
last week. I was
come up with-
describing one. I think it would go into the advocacy, or maybe children's. One that did come out of the film festival that I think got some recognition, or at least it was played one year. It really impressed me. Was that animated one of the man who planted trees?
Oh, yeah.
That's probably manipulative, but boy, it's just a simple, clean, and when I say clean, not moralistically, but just a clean-cut, simple story with a message of hope in the end.
And I think it's good in its teaching, especially for the younger generation. But when everyone saw the show on the shark, everyone was thinking in their head, manipulation, this is ugly. So I just wanted to bring up the fact that
Good point.
us with our agendas also want to manipulate, and we can't point fingers and say they're manipulating. We have to say, well, we are too, but our reasons are better, so it's...
But see, that's where I sleep better at night, because I know I'm right.
On that note, let's watch this little piece here. Turn back up on that.
Another with African origins is the brilliantly plumed Abyssinian roller. The male roller is one of nature's most skillful aerobatic performers. He makes a series of early morning flights to advertise his territory, but saves his most flamboyant display to attract a mate. Pairs often take to the air together, but as an exhibitionist, the male is on his own. The female roller observes its display.
And then when the music comes in, I think it weaves through really nicely, and it stops, you see the birds again. And it's more clear to me because I've seen this entire film, and that music really tells me what that film is about. It happens to be about the Sahara Desert and the animals that live there. And that music was made for this film, and to me, it's Sahara Desert music. It gives me that sense of place, and it's very unobtrusive. The first time I watched it, I really didn't notice that music, except at the very beginning. So if you don't notice it, if you just look at the pictures and hear the natural sound, then I feel that it's very well done. And then the editing in that little sequence is very smooth. And, I thought it was
We had a
just
workshop
nice little
last
piece.
spring on music and song and music and films, and one of the persons involved makes her living back in New York. Well, she was in New York, now she's in Portland, just doing music, sound. The other person involved just recently gotten a PhD in education, but in terms of using music in educating. She isn't teaching music, she's teaching using music. And real interesting workshop. They came up with some ideas I'd never heard of before.
Yeah, we have to have some of Susan's stuff here. We'll show a little bit later. So Susan Ring, who does the music for wildlife films, in this particular piece that we just saw, the music was actually made for the film. They didn't take some canned classical music and try to use the ups and the downs, I don't know the musical terms, but and then fit the animals walking to the pounding of the drums or something like that. They playing classical music, and you see that in a lot of wildlife films, and it drives me crazy. But these pieces that were actually made for the film, and somebody that does that for a living just for wildlife film, I think works very well. So that's always something to consider in a wildlife piece, is to try to create the music for that piece and not use something that's already there. Because then it hardly ever works, in my opinion.
Music didn't work.
Really?
You know, I was.
The Condor, remember the Condor series where they used the native, that music worked for me in terms of bringing music from the area. This didn't say Sahara Desert. Maybe if I'd seen it from the beginning, it would.
Yeah.
It didn't. When I saw that, I saw continuity nightmares trying to make one bird and then two birds come together. I mean, the editing was really pretty good. There was one kind of bad cut where it was going up and then they cut, but it was long. But it was, the continuity was, that's the one thing that I don't think people that haven't made wildlife films understand, that in filmmaking, you can have clean exit, clean entrance, you can get right to left relationship, but when you're doing wildlife filmmaking, you have to constantly be thinking about edit points, and amateur wildlife filmmakers sit and follow things all around, and then, so where are you gonna cut? Someplace it has to fly off the screen. So when I see something like that, and where it isn't, you see them going from different directions and swooping, and then they come in, and then, the pretty music, and they're together at the end, single, single, single. I saw Love Story too. Single, 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 and then they come together at the end was nice, but I thought continuity nightmares. They did a good job.
Well, that's the same thing you brought up, Patty, in your workshop. You had said that when you go out and shoot, you think about what you're going to do in the editing room. So I think that's what, Jack, you're saying here, is when you go out and shoot, you've got to think about what you're going to do as far as editing is concerned.
And make sure, this point that Jack makes is really important, that you don't just say honed in on the animal. I mean, do that and shoot far more than you ever think you're going to need, because you're going to need it. But let the wolf walk off screen, and let the bird fly off screen, and let them come into the screen. Let these things happen.
In cases where you can,
Well, but I mean.
wildlife in particular, it's very hard to.
Oh, you mean
get
a lot of times they just disappear
That's
on
why we
their
put
own.
away to the hens sitting in the
Yeah,
mud,
exactly.
so they
Yeah,
can
you
cover
can
bad
tell,
editing.
Yeah.
Well, we know that, but the general audience doesn't. I was gonna mention that, but I thought glitch in the footage. That's
No,
what
this
I
guy
thought.
got in the edit room, he says, what the hell am I gonna do? Oh, we got this shot of the hens in the mud, okay, well, slap that baby in there, now we can go on.
Well, and last year, go ahead.
I like the music, but I think it's just interesting because, I also felt that was like projecting human emotion, which is not, I suppose, truly scientific. But I think the whole point is it is for an audience of humans to watch this, and that on a certain level
know, so I always have to deal with that. You know, well, that's who I am, and that's how I'm gonna see it regardless, but then again,
I have a
away from it
story
too, but, yeah.
story for you. Again, I'll hammer this one till the cows come home. That's the importance of story. I've studied mythology and folklore, and one of the things that Joseph Campbell said that I love is that myths are the nest that the instinctive nest that humans build to protect their young. You know, we don't just tell stories for the hell of it. It's an instinctive need. It's the way we convey information. It's the way we tell members of our culture how to conduct themselves within our society. It's the oldest form of education. And you're gonna, I mean, if you get sensitized to this, you hear it over and over. People say, hey, I've got a story to tell you. Let me tell you this story about what happened to me this weekend. Well, here's a story that happened to me in terms of anthropomorphism, because this is that, God, I've gone around and around on this one. How far do you go with that? Well, I was out in the field on a study that my wife was doing, and she had this assistant, and he was truly a wildlife management person. He was straight by the book, and we were in wrestling deer in these clover traps. You got to get in there, and great fun, you know, trapping animals for their own good. Just say. And I got done, and I get out of there, and I said, boy, she must have really been scared. Oh, no, she wasn't. Well, excuse me, maybe you weren't watching the same trap that I was in, but she just really put up a fight. She was really scared. Oh, no, animals don't feel fear. That was a perceived, that was a response to a perceived threat. Wait a minute, isn't that fear? Anyway, that whole winter we kept going around and around. He was saying I was being anthropomorphic by saying that this doe felt fear.
Well,
I
unless,
guess just at the beginning here, I wanted to see what you thought about the music, if you saw a little bit more of it. I remember this very same piece is weaved throughout the whole thing, so it might give you a little bit more sense on it.
but unless you're somebody like Paul just documenting a workshop, you know, the bottom line is you want somebody to watch it, you know, and I think that's what we're really struggling with is these techniques of how to keep the audience, you know, and if you're going to sell it to somebody, you got to get to the sponsor too, and you know, teachers constantly worry about anybody going to take their class at university level. You know, you don't have to take their class. You can take a hike if you're not a lousy teacher. And some people say teachers should take acting courses, and it's the same kind of thing we're talking about here. I think, you know, and it's a matter of keeping it honest. You know, I don't care what you guys might do in terms of the music or the sound or manipulating sex. If it's, you know, if it's true to nature, I can live it, and then tell me what you did. And
Yeah, but you're saying you don't care about the music or anything. If it's true to nature, just even like the Ocean Symphony and the shark we saw, if it's true to nature, but the music and the narrative portrays the visuals that are true to nature as something evoking another emotion in us.
yeah,
What do
well
you
then it
feel
might
about
not be
that?
true. But if it doesn't screw up what you're trying to say, and it keeps people there, that's important. Just like a teacher can lecture all day, if nobody's in there, he's not getting anywhere. You know.
If it doesn't entertain, nobody's gonna watch it.
Sure, I agree there.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
a
gotta be
reality.
somehow.
But it can be done entertaining, the music could be good, everything could be good. I mean, I've seen it done, and see, that's my point. Chuck's saying it doesn't matter how it looks as long as the message is there. I think it can be done good in all ways.
We might have somebody that really hates violin who would rather hear a country western tune.
Sure.
No, I didn't say how it looks. The artistic,
Well,
yeah, you know.
I have a friend that's a visual artist, and he does things based on rivers and whatnot. And one of the rivers he's done is the Madison. He like travels them and then does these huge murals. But we went up around Yellowstone and Quake Lake and shot a bunch of video just to show kind of the setting this stuff was created in to go with this show. We didn't even worry about the editing. I think we shot it and edited it for like 2 days. And said, we'll just stick it over in the corner. People would sit and we put some music to it. People sat and would cultures, and they went.
Well, that's one beauty of animals, though, is people do like to watch them. You know,
We
I
just had
started.
no animals either. We didn't want to
Uh,
do it. We didn't want to do Yellowstone with animals.
But
We
you don't.
had tracks, we had dead bison. I mean, we had the kinds of stuff people don't think of when they see that.
Partly the reason I ended up as a wildlife biologist messing with film because I was a bear biologist. You know, if I had been a biologist with something else, I wouldn't have become so sensitive to the tremendous attractiveness that certain animals have to people, and that led me to where I am today about, you know, looking at the whole thing in terms of film and the mass media, you know. And I'm supposed to be out there trapping them and strangling them and getting them tagged and such. But to me, this is the more important part, and it was a bear that led me to that. And I think all animals have, you know, half your job is done. All you have to do is do the rest of it.
Let's just see this real quick and then we can show some other music.
This is the same film they use.
Yeah, I didn't.
Arabia is a land of legendary deserts. This vast peninsula covers an area almost the size of Europe. "35 million years ago, Arabia was part of Africa. But at that time it began to break away,
To me,
isolating many kinds of
this
wildlife.
music, the only emotion that it evokes for me is desert, and I like that. It doesn't give me an emotion about any particular animal. That's why I feel like this music is so good. And then they take this musical theme and weave it in and out. That was the point I was making before. I don't know if this makes it clear or not.
Yeah.
It's a personal thing.
Well, and they had the natural sound of also.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
just like
Right.
that. Yeah.
I see though where the makeup, it was a little out of context.
Sure, yeah, yeah. That's why I
But
wanted
there's
to play
also a
it.
Western bias in the music itself because it stays with a polyphonic scale.
Whoa.
With the Western mode scale rather than going to the polychronic Middle Eastern scale. So they've cheated already, I mean, in terms of, you self-identified it as
Because it's a
desert
Western
music, but we're
audience.
not gonna give you
Yeah.
real authentic Arab tones.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, it's what we've sort of,
Yeah. What you accept as being Arab music.
yeah,
in
what we
Western-
would like to hear.
for Western ears.
All those things are so important, and I think they're so neglected. Our country is unique in that we require 6 judges, and they have to be 3 different kinds. There's a media filmmaker kind, there's a scientist, researcher kind, and then there's the artist, human kind. And to pick up those kind of things, you know, if you're a bunch of filmmakers you're looking at, they wouldn't pick that up. If you're a bunch of biologists looking at it, they wouldn't pick that up. Human input, you know.
Yeah, took part in one of the judging sessions a number of years ago, and it was actually more enlightening in a sense, made me very interested in judging. The NFLCP does a hometown judging as well, and I get involved in that as much as I can. But it was always interesting. I remember at the time we looked at a thing about badgers, and they had this film with a badger going up a tree and into a den or something up in this tree, and when it was all done, I said, and then they cut to inside the tree, and it comes in. I mean, it was tails in, heads in, tails out, type of that kind of reverse shot, and I mean, it was obvious that they manipulated it. And one of the biologists made a comment about how that seemed odd that would happen, and was talking about the mating. They were portraying the mating habits at the wrong time of year, and I I said, well, yeah, not only that, but, you know, they had a filmmaker, they were portraying this as somebody wild, and I wonder how many cameramen would have been sitting up in the tree waiting for this badge to come back in, or whatever it was. So it was a real interesting kind of process. It worked really well.
You have to pick it apart. You have to pick every film apart.
And we were.
It is a learning process, yeah.
It worked really well.
How many of you guys attended Jack's audio session? No. Okay, a few. You did? Anyway, just a couple things to say in terms of audio, because Paula had pointed out hearing the mat sound in there. I mean, the click of the horns, you could hear that above the music, and then there's obviously you heard the camels. You know, your camera, if you're shooting the video, which is what we're all basically working with, you're not always going to pick up the sound, right? So make sure that you record sounds that are out there, and record, like Lori was saying, like where it was quiet for a moment, you know, where the birds went up like that and it was quiet for a moment, but you could still hear some chirps in the background. You know, have that in there. You really start watching this critically. It's like when birds start beating their wings, you know, you hear this flap. Well, it's really unlikely with this huge telephoto shot across a lake that their mic got that. Sometimes you need to manufacture your own sound. You know, that's what the whole Foley artist thing is. And in the beginning of our wolf piece, we have a little dramatic hook in there, and this person's out alone, and we have the wind blowing. Well, I just couldn't find any good wind on sound effects, because they were always like a hurricane. They just, you know, so I just got into a room and just, and it worked, you know.
Yeah, a lot of the animal sounds are like that. I think the one that impressed me the most, BBC did a series on called the Open Ocean. I don't remember if that was the name of the series or the piece. There's a polar bear walking across the ice, and the sound effects were just wonderful. They were crunch, 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 crunch. And I had asked the producer about that at one time. What'd you do? You know, you followed the bear around, you did that. He had set up the mic in his kitchen and went into his icebox and started scraping ice out of his icebox, dubbed that in, and there was no way, I couldn't even pick it up, there was no way to tell. Of course, the editing was done so finely. But is that natural sound or is that not? But what's the chance of, like Bruce said, of you going out there and filming that polar bear walking across the ice and getting the sound at the same time, unless you're paying a sound man to follow you.
A lot of sound men followed.
Well,
the late Jim Smith. You'll be like.
You can draw on your knowledge of what polar bears walking across the snow.
Right. What they sound like, yeah.
I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got them chomping on his tent and stuff too, so.
Yeah, I think the question about when is it natural or not is, of course it's not, it's a videotape.
Yeah. You're
Or
right.
it's film, you know? It's picked up through microphones, it's been altered, through the magic of magnets. I mean, no, it's not natural.
But
It's as
that in itself
close as we can get.
is crucial, though, if we are in fact moving on to what I call a television worldview. If in fact we're going that way, then boy, every single thing like that's got to be called into question. We have to rethink all of it, you know.
What bothers me most, knowing that the sound, the polar bear's footsteps were dubbed, or someone telling you the thoughts of a seagull. What bothers
Right,
you the most?
right.
There is a big difference.
Yeah. Sound to me it's not, I mean, as far as creating animal sounds, it's not a big problem. I don't see that as an ethical problem, unless of course you put a cow sound in for a bear. But who's not gonna know that
Well,
belongs?
the
But yeah,
cow sounds like a bear if
I'm
it
not-
works.
Yeah, I'm not real big on that as far as.
An example for, you know, see, I guess I have no ethical problems on sound, because you know, you're just creating stuff, trying to make it sound real. But the example that I used for you guys to study, when's the last time you saw Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid? Probably been a while. Anyway, if you watch this film sometime, check it out. The only time they use music is in transitions. You know, the bicycle scene, raindrops fall on your head, and then anyway, it's like a chapter change, like they're going to South America or something like that. But the whole rest of the show, which is so unusual for Hollywood, revolves around natural sound and then dialogue. And so, like in a chase scene, you're hearing accentuated sound. You're hearing the you know, the hooves going along there. You're hearing the snort of the horses as they breathe. You're hearing the creak of leather, and it really puts you in the scene. And it's something I really advocate in terms of filmmaking or wildlife filmmaking, is to turn up the sound so it really puts people in that scene. Yeah.
And the classic Foley artist also is scrupulous about trying to make the reproduced sound, if not be an accurate depiction of the real sound, be something which people recognize as being an accurate depiction. And the cornstarch and ice in a tray has been used for a long time to get snow sounds, and it's a relatively close approximation. And I mean, I think there is an issue that, you know, how honest is your sound? Well, it's not like, you know, you don't have the frigid air humming, the crunching of the ice, but you have an attempt at something that's reasonably close to the sound of the footprint on ice and compressing rough granule ice. And that seems fair.
Sure.
It's not wildly exaggerated sound. I mean, it's exaggerated from the perspective of where you are and what you're seeing, but in terms of proximity, it would be, you know, real close to that. But it's not like you're showing the wrong bird.
Yeah, it's on a different level than staging and manipulating the animal itself. It's on, to me, it's a whole different level.
I was just responding to him, speaking of scarcity and the sun when I was a kid, and using that natural sound. That was also one of the first Hollywood movies I've seen where they tried to use natural time, like a chase scene on horses. They didn't make the horses run fast, the horses run. They blow the law, which is another thing that's considered, you know, when you're talking about changing. I mean, you can't show real time, but you can approximate it as best you can, so people get the idea that, okay, this is slower than.
Well, do we have any other comments? Because I think we're at the end of this session. Isn't it 4:30?
4:45.
Oh, 4:45. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna say, I think I'm pretty much in the same camp with you about nat sound and capturing more and dubbing it in, and yet there's also a part of me that sort of, you know, it sort of raises why the whole ethical thing is sort of like trying to nail Jello to a wall. I mean, it's a really hard thing to define. And Chuck's saying, you know, if you do some of that staging stuff, but it's, you know, pretty much documentable, but that's, you know, the way it really is. I mean, that's really what you're doing with nat sound and dubbing it in too. And it's sort of like, yeah, you know, I feel sort of the same way that you do. But why, you know, why do we, you know, what is it about my ethics or your ethics or whatever that feels like it's, you know, it's a lot more okay to do that with sound than.
Well, part of that is harassment. I mean, you could be up there with the animal, you know, listening as its teeth gnawed on a bone. You're probably scared away from the kill, or
Well,
you'd get killed.
Feeding the fly to the lizard.
Right, I was
That's
gonna
sort
bring
of like-
that up. Is that okay, or is it okay to dip the character in the piranha?
What I think is more important than absolutely trying to define it is knowing that it's kind of a gray area and teaching people more the, you know, the critical viewing sort of issues and skills that Chuck was talking about earlier, so that, you know, we can see these. I mean, one of the real frustrations I have with television as a medium is so often we view things in isolation and we don't, you know, we're not able to interact with others and talk about what we saw and what, you know, what worked for me and what didn't, and, you know.
It really does help, doesn't it? Even just from this group right here, watching different things and how each little
But we really need to develop the academic side of it, I think, as well as the scientific side of it, also the teaching skill side of it, the communication skill, and for, you know, a lot of it is on the news. It's a wildlife film, but it was on the news, you know, and the public doesn't differentiate. And so, you know, we need to work with the journalists and, you know, develop those skills too. And that's why I always see it in terms of all these pyramids. The problem is if we don't give them a push, they're all going to sit there just like the pyramids in Egypt. And what we need to do, I think, from all this kind of discussion and looking at it academically is, you know, is to nudge those pyramids together and get rid of some of those problems. The problems are different for the news type wildlife film. They're different for the type film that's made specifically for schools, and on down the line. And we haven't even started trying to do that, and it's high time we get our butts in gear on it, I think, because right now a lot of it's out of control and growing like topsy, fueled primarily of, you know, by money, and that's not a good way. You know, almost everybody notices a difference of stuff produced in the British Commonwealth. Well, they had the crown corporations, they are free from political control, and they government has to give them a bunch of money. Government can't screw around with them. Well, in the agency, the Crown Corporation is free to hire real good people to do good stuff, you know, and you're going to get a better product. We don't have that advantage here. Our main defense, I think, is to better be able to read it and better be able to evaluate it. And then you don't need to control it. If people can look at it and say, hey, it's bullshit, then you don't have to have a law making against that kind of a film, you know.
I would say that there is now, PBS has a small portion of their budget set aside for independent filmmakers whose project or style will not be given a traditional PBS venue. And PBS has the right of first refusal, second refusal, third refusal, basically. They essentially lock up your independent production. But it is a wholly new funding source for film. Granted, most of them are going to be social documentary issue films that don't fit into the traditional PBS package. But there is, I think, a place for alternative wildlife films too. They were not real receptive to it in their discussions, but it was one that they said in the next go-round of financing they may consider.
Well, that's good to hear, because I know which one you're talking about. And I didn't find, because Bruce and I tried to get in on them, and I didn't find them very receptive. Probably, it could have been because we're not very well known as documentary producers. It could be because they didn't want our wildlife format. I don't know. I thought it was more of a political thing. I didn't think that they were very receptive to what we have. But then that's a whole nother thing. That goes into funding and who's going to take what, who's going to fund it. Yeah, I'll find that. That's great.
What's that?
They were
Consider that.
they were quite specific about
Oh, you wanna see the wolf?
reevaluating the
I'll
entire
put in a
process
little
over
clip
the
of
next
that.
couple of years.
Well, they
And they
need
wanted
to.
people to understand very specifically that they had many plans, essentially that they were preset to. But there's 2 and 3 rounds of funding that have yet to be decided. And they were at least talking to people involved in the production process.
Well, the last thing we want is a lot of money with a lot of control. I'd rather have less money and no control. Then you get the creativity.
That was their whole issue was final
Yeah.
cut must be the responsibility of filmmakers.
Yeah.
Only filmmakers, no other organization. That was pretty cool.
Hmm.
What do you got? Oh, you got the wolf thing. It's okay.
But we don't have the advantage of the Crown Corporation, so our really, in the United States, our only option, I think, is to have a discerning public. Once the public is discerning and say that's lousy, you know, then they're going to encourage the better productions because they're going to demand it, and they're, you know, on a pay-as-you-come basis. You know, so that's why the teacher's role in all this is so crucial, and teachers are not learning how to do it. At U of M, they have a big education department, and last year I looked at their course. They had 56 different courses. Only 2 of them dealt with the media, and those were just how do you run a camera, you know, and how you push the button on a VCR. Nothing in terms of criticism or creativity or production or anything like that.
This is just a real quick little clip from a concept pilot, not a finished product at all, but Patty was interested to see what Lori and I had done with the wolf. This will just give you a really quick idea of what we did musically with the wolf.
Not a lot of it and men, they wrote as wrote. I do not think it possible to define completely the sort of animals men require in order to live. They are always changing and are different for different people. Everybody's happy, except the wolf.
Which is against what I mentioned before about trying to get the music to go, create the music for the piece, but ours is a little bit different. You explain it. We didn't use, this is canned music, obviously, you know, what I mentioned
Yeah,
earlier.
well, we're blending, we're showing how the wolf has been portrayed, not just in story, but in art and in music. I mean, we have Peter and the Wolf, that musical score in there, and we've got, Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs in there. And then this last piece, I mean, there are just some pieces that I went through and picked out, some music that I found on CD.
But we learn next time we're gonna have our
And next time I'd like to have an original musical score put together.
So did you have to get permission from every one of those artists to use Chris Van Alford, who's
Yeah.
two pieces?
Yeah, it was an administrative nightmare.
I know.
For your information, Lori and Bruce and I have been teaching over the last year wildlife filmmaking for 4 kids, and even advertising it in the schools and stuff. And hell, we don't even know how to do it, but I think we're trying to teach it. But I think, you know, like, if you look, how do you learn to write poetry? You write poetry. How you learn what's a good essay and what's a bad one? You write essays, you know? And it's high time this sort of thing be introduced in the schools. And I put up a paper up here called Television and the Teacher. You might want to pick one up. And there's one, the Wildlife and Environmental Filmmaking. Of course, this is some of the things that we've picked up over the years in terms of evaluating what you're seeing. And this is a thing for next year's film. There's a couple more copies than ever cried for earlier.